Hi, everybody. I'm Lee Wind. I'm the Director of Marketing and Programming for the Independent Book Publishers Association, and you've arrived at the IBPA PubU online webinar all about making your books appealing to the K-12 market with our presenter, Jane R. Wood. I'm very excited. Jane, thank you so much for being here. And this is a webinar, going through the slides like crazy. This is a webinar sponsored by Ingram. And we are really fortunate to have one of my favorite people, Bailey Davis from Ingram, who is here. And Bailey is just going to say a few words at the top to welcome y'all because they're sponsoring. So Bailey, take it away.
Thank you, Lee. You are also one of my favorite people.
Yeah.
Also thank you, Jane, for having me. I really am just so excited about this content. When I saw that this was one of the webinars, I was really thrilled to be a part of it. And thank you for the attendees as well. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who I am and what Ingram does, but really thrilled to be a part of this webinar, Jane, and learn everything I can from you. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bailey Davis. I lead the sales team at Ingram Content Group, specifically focusing on our independent publishers and small presses, and specifically leading our recently launched Ingram Ignite program, which is designed specifically for small presses and independent publishers. For those of you a little less familiar with Ingram, not only do we print and ship your books, as you're familiar with Lightning Source and Spark, but we also get them where readers expect to find them. In a general sense, Ingram makes your title and content available to over 40,000 retailers and libraries globally. And we're really proud that we partner with independent bookstores, big chains, local retailers, libraries, schools, and universities, as well as the more familiar online retailers that a lot of consumers are engaging with today. We develop and maintain those relationships for you, giving you more time to do what it is that you do best, which is creating amazing, wonderful content that the world wants to read. Lightning Source and Ingram Ignite and Ingram Spark offer book publishers and authors all over the world that added freedom to control their business themselves through a suite of services that we offer. For those of you that might want to learn more, we're going to include a link in the chat where you can actually request someone to reach out and talk to you about Ingram and what your options are. But with that, I want to just go ahead and pass that over to Jane and Lee, because I am so thrilled to learn about this market and what we can be doing to more effectively be accessing it. So thank you, Lee. Thank you, Jane.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Bailey. And it always has to happen at least once that I'm on mute when I start talking, So, hey, we can check that off. We did that. God, mission accomplished. My work here is done. No, before Jane starts the presentation, I wanted to remind you that there actually is one additional way that we're going to be interactive. We're going to try a poll. So as a publisher, and we know even if you're an author publisher, you're here with your publisher hat on. Are you targeting for the K through 12 market? Are you looking at elementary, pre-K through 2, elementary grades 3 through 5, middle school grades 6 to 8, or high school grades 9 to 12? Mind you, you can choose multiple ones. And I don't know, can you all see that it's changing as you enter the answers? It's live. It's very exciting. All right, so we're going to let that go for a couple of minutes. And Jane, take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm still seeing the surveys or the poll. Is everybody else?
Yeah, it's still cooking along. Okay,
can I just minimize that? I can. Hey, you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yes, I feel very much like I'm learning new tricks every day.
Well, let me start by giving just a little bit of background about my journey in the publishing of books. I actually started with a publisher in my first book came out in 2004. And I ended up self-publishing because they convinced me to go that route because my market was schools. And they said they didn't know how to market to schools. They didn't know how to create anything, either the content of the books or the marketing materials or strategies for schools. And they strongly suggested I do my own thing. So in 2007, I started my own company, back then, self-publishing was kind of a challenge. Not a lot of people were doing it. It wasn't extremely highly thought of by a lot of bookstores and libraries and other groups. So we've come a long way since then. And there's tremendous amount of resources out there today for people that want to market and sell their books to schools, obviously to self-publish, but to market and sell to schools. And I will tell you, and disclaimer, that all of my books have been published through Lightning Source, which is an Ingram platform. And so I was very pleased to learn that we're kind of partnering today to talk about this topic. So having told you that, I will let you know that most of my books, my sales, have been to schools over the years. And that comes in 3 different formats: selling books to the schools, usually the library or classroom sets, getting a speaking fee, and then selling to the students when I do an author visit, or when there's some kind of program going online with the school and a virtual visit with me, and the students get to buy books. So there's, for authors out there, particularly self-published authors, there's money to be made by marketing to schools. And of course, getting support and help from a publisher, if that's what you've got, or for publishers. I'm going to talk a little bit today about what you can do to help the authors sell their books.
And
So
Jane, I just want to interject and say that I closed the poll and it's incredibly evenly spaced out. I mean, 57% are interested in pre-K through 2, 51% are interested in elementary 3 to 5, 49% interested in middle school 6 to 8, and 49% interested in high school 9 to 12. And I know we're not math geniuses, but like that's more than 100% because you could all do more than one, but pretty much half or more than half of you are interested in all of it. So
oh,
just for
wow.
context, that's really helpful to know. Thank you all for
That's incredible. And that's good information to know. And I will be addressing all of those grade levels as I speak. And obviously I'll take questions at the end. So if you have something very specific about one of the things I mentioned, make a note so you ask me about it later. And I'll be honest with you, even though I tell my husband this, I don't know everything about everything. So if you ask me a question and I'm not sure, I'll be very candid and say, well, I'm not sure about that, but I'll check on it.
And I think that's exciting that we all can still learn more, even when you are the expert, that you can still learn more. I think that's cool.
Good, good. All right, let's go. I'm going to share my screen and get the, well, where'd the PowerPoint go? We had it up earlier, Lee.
You may need to open it on your desktop and then find it when you hit share screen.
We just had it up.
Okay, so this is where I'll just fill the time and space and say, it's live, it's exciting. And that's why most programs on TV are pre-recorded. And it is all good. So Jane, you can also
Here we go.
Okay, cool.
I think we're there. Oops, except we're at the end. We're going to have to go all the way back to the beginning.
That's all right. And Jody just said a very kind thing on the chat saying, I teach class with Zoom every day. No worries. It always happens.
From the beginning. Okay, here we go. Fasten your seatbelts.
Woohoo.
Obviously, I'm doing this with IBPA, and I've been a member since, I don't know, a long time ago, because they've been a wonderful resource for me over the years. And I love all the resources they provide. Publishing University, I've attended 3 of them, just a wealth of knowledge. Let's start about some of the ground rules. There's certain dynamics when you talk about appealing to schools. You've got different perspectives. The publisher has one perspective and they want to sell books, preferably bulk orders. But you've got the author perspective as well. They want to sell books too, but many of them want to educate. They might be former teachers, or if they're looking to go into the school market, they care about teaching kids. And then, of course, there's all of the tools that the authors need to help market and promote their books. So we're going to talk about that today as well. Issues involving pricing. I've had authors tell me, well, by the time I offer a discount to schools, which is what they expect, I'm not making any money. So why should I do this? We need to talk about that. Marketing, creating campaigns. helping authors with a book launch, providing marketing tools. So these are some issues that are out there. And then, of course, fulfillment. I've had authors who books are published by a traditional publisher have difficulty with the fulfillment because they don't know whether they're going to distribute the book, they're going to order it and then distribute it, if it's going to be drop shipped. Obviously, Ingram does a great job of that. If you know exactly how many books the school is interested in, you can order them and they can be sent directly to the school. Then we talk about the issue of signing the books and personalizing them to the students, but those are all details that can be worked out. You've got two audiences. You've got the educators, and they're the ones that buy. But you've also got the students, they're the readers. So you need to keep those two audiences in mind when you're trying to appeal to the school market. And then, of course, we have genres. Nonfiction is kind of a no-brainer. Nonfiction fits into a lot of school curriculum. And then we've got the different areas that we talked about in the poll. You've got your K-2 books, which is mostly going to be picture books or easy readers. Grades 3 through 5 are juvenile fiction. Sometimes they're called middle readers, chapter books, graphic novels. And then when you get to middle school and high school, there's your YA market, and certainly all kinds of nonfiction is applicable for high school classes, and even some what we'd call adult fiction. You just got to kind of know your local market or your state market. Who are your buyers and how do you market to them? Well, your buyers are educators, and they are very unique animals. They've been trained as educators, not business people. Now, at the state level, you're going to get some savvy people in the business world because they're used to purchasing large bulk orders of textbooks and technology and all kinds of materials. The district level, you're still going to have some savvy there. But when you get to individual schools, frequently you're dealing with a media specialist, sometimes an administrator or an individual teacher. And they really, many times, are clueless of how to order a book, how to approach an author, how to find a book that's appropriate for their class, and then communicate with either publisher or the author. So you've got to realize that you've got different levels of business acumen when you're dealing with educators. One of the most important things that you need to do, and if you get nothing else from this discussion, it's research the standards. It's mostly state standards. We had a thing called Common Core standards several years ago. That's gone by the wayside. In fact, it's got a negative connotation today. But I can tell you that all states are going to have some form of state standards. Many of them are changing them as we speak. In fact, because I live in Florida and I market a lot in Florida, I stay on top of the standards that are happening here, and they are literally changing as we speak. They are changing some of the standards in July of 2021, and they're supposed to be implemented when school starts in August here. So it's a very fluid topic. And what I need to do is direct you to the district and the state websites to see what the current standards are. I just went to the standards page in the state of California, and many of them were quite old. They go back to 2009, 2013. So again, you have to do a little research. You might have to do some Google searches of something more current than what's on the state website. Same thing with districts. Many of them will echo, obviously, the state standards, but they'll have some areas that they focus on specifically. So when you're targeting a market, you want to look at both the state standards, the district websites to find out what their standards are. And you say, well, what do I look for? Well, it might be called standards. It might be called curriculum or instruction or accountability. I will tell you that in the educational community, they have all kinds of jargon and terms. And usually you can figure it out if it's not exactly what you were looking for. So just become familiar with the standards for the state that you're marketing to. And like myself, I don't just market in Florida. So if I'm going to talk to schools in Virginia or in Massachusetts or California, I always go check out their standards before I go there, because that's going to help me integrate the content of my book into what the teachers are having to teach, and it's going to help me sell more books.
And
You
Jane,
also
are you explicit
understand,
about it? Do you say like, as as standard 3B subsection 2, says that they have to learn this, my book does that? Or are you more just trying to integrate mirror the language without being so explicit?
you want to correlate your content to what the standard says. Now, usually it's very broad. I'm going to show you one in just a few minutes. It's very broad, and you can use that on a broad term. But sometimes you want to get very specific because you're targeting a specific class. Maybe at the middle school and high school level, that's more important. Say somebody's teaching an American history class at the 11th grade level, and they're going to focus in on World War II, the Holocaust. Then you're getting into some very specific, what they call benchmarks as part of the standards. So yes, depending on who you're marketing it to, who you're targeting, you would want to look at those standards, and you want to get as specific as you think you need to be.
Thanks.
Another point, you need to understand purchasing procedures. They're usually found on the website at the state DOE, Department of Education site. Most districts, school districts, will have a purchasing procedure or policy, and frequently you need to apply to be a vendor to sell there. It doesn't cost anything. You got to jump through a few hoops. Maybe your book will be put before a committee that approves books, but these are all just processes and procedures that you're going to have to deal with when you're marketing to schools. You might want to identify any special programs that provide funding. For example, in the state of Florida, just this month, they launched a new program, and I have to read. It's called Home Delivery of Books for Elementary Students Reading Below Grade Level. Well, basically, if you've got a book that targets 3rd, 4th, 5th, even K through 2, there's going to be money out there for schools. Say it's a 4th grader, but they're only reading on a 2nd grade reading level. This is a program sponsored by the state. They've budgeted $200 million for this program, or programs to promote reading. And so there's going to be money out there for schools to purchase these books. I understand, because it's still being created, that it's going to be coordinated through a state university. So again, that's more homework and research on my part. What university, once they announce who it is, and who do I connect with there, and what do they want to see to include my book in their program? But there's all kinds of programs out there being created, particularly today, to improve reading with kids that are reading below reading level. And then, of course, you want to consider school themes like the environment is a big theme. Diversity is going to be a big theme this year. So many districts will have an overall theme. Specific schools will have a theme. Maybe they have a mascot of a pirate, or in my case, I have a book that's got an environmental theme, and I've got a manatee on the cover. Whenever I find a school that's got a manatee as their mascot, I shoot them an email, or I pick up the phone and contact them. And then, of course, you've got all the STEM and the STEAM programs. Those of you not familiar with that, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And then the A they added is for arts. And there's specific schools that focus on that. You've got magnet schools, schools that are arts schools, science and technology schools, medical programs. There's all kinds of magnet programs in schools across the country, and a lot of STEM and STEAM programs. So if you've got a book that gets into any of those topic areas, science, engineering, weather, biology, nature, I mean, I don't need to go through all of them. You can figure it out. But those are schools that you may want to focus on targeting your marketing efforts.
Jane, Cynthia had a question about the purchasing information, and does that also apply to libraries, for school libraries?
Yes. Most of the time, schools that are books that are bought at individual schools, it's going to go through the media specialist or the librarian. They frequently have their own budget. It's usually not a very big budget, but they have their own budget. There's also programs that the school will do as fundraisers. Maybe it's the fall carnival. Maybe it's when they do a scholastic book fair, they can get money or they can get books, and that will go towards the library budget so they can buy other books. So you just need to hopefully go to the school website, find out who the media specialist is for that school, and either make a phone call, a very brief phone call, because they're busy. I like to send an email and keep it very succinct, telling them who you are, you've got a book, can I give you a call, or can I send you some information? If their if their email isn't listed on the school website, pick up the phone, call the school, ask at the front desk, whoever answers the phone, if you can have the email address for the media specialist, or ask to be connected to the library or the media center. And when you get someone on the phone, you don't want to keep them there forever. They may have a class in there and it may be assistant. Just say, I would like the email address of the media specialist so I can send something to him or her. So that's how you would deal with it at the individual school level.
Thanks.
What kind of content is appealing to schools? Number one, the content must be appropriate from the classroom. I have an interesting anecdote I can tell you about my very first book. It's called Voices in St. Augustine. It obviously takes place in St. Augustine. I like to weave history and science into my storylines. And in the first chapter, my 8th grader, my 13-year-old, is assigned a history project. And the last sentence of chapter 1 said, "History sucks," Joey thought. I had several beta readers, teacher beta readers, tell me, if you leave that word in there, I can't use it in my class. Now, that was many years ago, and things have loosened up a little, but still, if you've got anything in there that might prove controversial, you may want to get it out of there, because you're not going to be able to sell it for use in the classroom. And of course, it's obvious you don't want foul language, you don't want sexually explicit material. However, now high schools are putting a lot of very interesting books on their reading list. So you may want to check out the reading list of the high schools or the district that you are targeting, because they're a lot more liberal than what you might see in middle school or elementary. But just keep appropriateness in the back of your mind. The second bullet there is probably the most crucial, and I mentioned that earlier. Content must reinforce the curricula. And the reason it must is schools just today, teachers, classrooms, they don't have the time to devote to just another cute book. You might have the cutest book in the world with the best illustrations. It's got a nice theme, it's got a moral, but if it doesn't support the curricula, it's very difficult for the schools to spend school money on it. They need to be reinforcing what the teachers are required to teach. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's got a cute theme or moral. It comes under the category of character education. I will tell you that most schools today will use the classics stories out there or materials that the teacher has created herself or himself to teach the character education, responsibility, all of those things in the 6 powers of I'm going blank, of character. You can research that online, the 6 pillars of character education. And your story might do that, but the schools really need to be focusing on the content, math, science, English, social studies. And there's a lot of other topics that come under that besides just straight science. Let me read you a few. Nature, weather, space, geography, health, nutrition, civics, government, global issues, war, the environment, other cultures, geology, all kinds of topics that your book might reinforce something in that area. And a good teacher will find that in the book and relate it back to what he or she is being required to teach. That's why it's so important for you to understand the standards and the grade level at which those are taught. So my third bullet, identify the target student audience. Subject, could be social studies. Grade level could be any grade level. They're going to have different expectations. Of course, they get more difficult, more specific as the kids get older. And then you may want to do a Lexile measure on your books. Lexile measurements are simply the reading level. And many schools want to know what is the Lexile measure for a particular book before they will assign it to their students or buy it or put it on a reading list. You can Google Lexile measure and you can submit your book to have the measurement done on that. But all of these are very important into breaking into the school market. Now, my comment at the bottom, if you don't know how to do these things, you don't feel like researching standards, you don't know how to do a Lexile measure, pay a teacher to help you identify these. Offer a teacher $100 or whatever and say, would you help me with this? There's a lot of teachers out there that would be willing to do that. Maybe $100 is a little too cheap, but I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's budget.
Jane?
Let me read you one of the standards so you understand what I'm talking about. This is in the state of Florida under social studies for 5th grade. The topic is American Revolution and Birth of a New Nation, because in 5th grade in Florida, that's where they study the founding of our country. The benchmark, and Lee, you were asking about this earlier, how specific do you get? For this standard, there's a benchmark that reads, hold on, identify significant individuals and groups who played a role in the American Revolution. So that's very specific. In my 5th book, I write juvenile fiction for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. My 5th book's called Lost in Boston. My characters go to Boston for a family wedding, and the mom says, let's go a few days early and go down to the Freedom Trail. I want you to learn a little American history here. So they tour the Paul Revere House. They tour the Old North Church. They visit the USS Constitution, which is that magnificent ship in Boston Harbor. This particular standard gets the attention of teachers when I'm trying to market to schools, specifically 5th grade. And so if you have this ammunition in your toolkit with your marketing plan, it can help you to market to schools. And that one was kind of, I would say, general. There are other benchmarks that are very, very specific. So it just depends on how broad or specific you want to be.
And then there's a follow-up question from Tara about the measures. I'm asking about F and P measures. Is that something that you use as well?
I'm not familiar with that. Tara,
Okay.
we need to talk, or you need to put some more in there. That's ringing a bell, but right now, I've had all my Lexile measures done so many years ago that I'm not even familiar with that now.
And then Jane, do you put the Lexile score on the back cover of the book, like on the back of it?
You can. It's definitely on my website. It's definitely on my marketing materials because I have a sell sheet, what some people call a sell sheet. I call my 5-book flyer, and I put all of that information there. And schools will ask you for it. Not all, but some of them will ask you. So you want to be prepared to have that because it makes you more credible.
Got it.
All right, here's how publishers can help market to schools. Offer discounts to schools and to students. I've had authors that have their books published by a traditional publisher, and their problem is they say, I just can't make any money selling the books to the schools because by the time, if they have to buy it and then they do the fulfillment, there's very little room for them to make any profit. And they've quite frankly told me, I'll just look at making my money with my speaking fee because it's just too complicated to deal with that. Same thing with the second bullet there. Give them support for fulfillment of the orders for schools. Again, if you're using a print on demand, they can have them shipped directly to the school. I like, because I self-publish, even if I'm doing a large order to school, I like them to come to me. I like to sign them. I like to personalize them when I bring them to the school. But you're looking at, pennies here. People are looking at their checkbook and say, wow, this way I could have made $3 a book and this way I'm making 30 cents a book. It's just something publishers need to think about. Offering discounts to students is very valuable too. I can tell you that I've gone to schools where I do a school visit and I've sold as many as 300 books just to the kids. Most of the time I average about 50 books when I do a school visit. And because I self-publish and I can set my own prices and I can offer my own discounts, I have control over all of that. But if it's a book, if it's a publisher, you need to help your authors out. And if you can give them a discount price for schools where they're still making a decent paycheck, then you need to do that. Getting books listed on education-related programs like Accelerated Reader. Now, AR is an elementary program. Basically, for those of you not familiar with it, you can go to renaissance.com. That's the company that runs Accelerated Reader. It's renaissance.com. And books are accepted into their program. Of course, they have to approve them. They create a quiz, a 10-question quiz. And then schools that subscribe to the AR program have their students read the AR books, take the quiz, and then the students get points. And usually at the end of the year, depending on the amount of points that a student has, they get prizes, they get rewards. Now, a lot of schools, a lot of educators don't like that. They say it's bribing them. They should be able to read what they want. As a parent, I know bribery works. And there's a lot of schools that use the AR program because they know the books have been evaluated and approved. And kids like competition. They like to know that they're going to be a reward at the end of the day because they've read a book. I'm not going to get into the philosophic discussion about it. I just made sure all of my books are in the AR program. And I can tell you, when I'm doing book signings at, say, a Barnes & Noble, parents will ask me, are your books AR books? And that sold a lot of books for me because they were in the AR program. You want to submit to be on recommended reading lists. There's state lists, there's district lists. Schools will have a list, usually at different grade levels. And there's certainly summer reading lists. I love it when my book is put on a summer reading list. Usually then the parents are ordering the books from me. They go to my website, but I don't care where they get it. I just want them reading the books. And then I usually am scheduled for an author visit to go to that school because they read it over the summer. And now this is a follow-up. You want to seek endorsements from credible education sources or experts on the subject matter. If you can get an endorsement from someone who's an expert, I have a friend who wrote a book about, it's a children's picture book about outer space. And I strongly suggested that she try to get an astronaut to endorse it. That's a credible source. I don't know if she ever got the astronaut, but I will tell you, her books sell out of the Kennedy Space Center gift shop because she made that connection. You want to submit to education-related conferences. Ideally, you want to be a presenter because then you've got a captive audience, or at minimum be a vendor. Some of them are prohibitively expensive, but some of them aren't so expensive. Every media specialist, library, state group will have some kind of conference. Now, last year, of course, they either didn't have them or they were virtual. Some of them are starting to open up now. And for any conference, you can't submit at the last minute. They're going to have open for submissions a year or 9 months in advance. So you need to be researching those websites early if you want to submit to be a presenter. And then, of course, as with anything, you've got to go in and really look at what their theme is, what they're looking for. A lot of them will be just reader related. Some of them will be very specific to a theme. Like I said, this year, diversity is going to be a big theme. There's just things you should understand, do your homework before you decide you're going to submit to present there or even to be a vendor. You want to invest your time and obviously your money wisely. But media specialist conferences or librarian conferences for schools around the country are very valuable places to be. More under the same category of how publishers can help authors, develop an educator distribution list. Now, obviously, the publisher and the author need to be working together on this, but that distribution list should include media specialists, teachers, reading coaches. It can include administrators. anybody that has the opportunity to purchase books for schools or even recommend them for reading. And that can even be parents. Sometimes you want to put a parent that just fell in love with your book. You think the whole class should be reading it. Keep that person on your distribution list, but keep it with an education focus. And then, of course, communicate with them through social media, e-newsletters. You want to promote any new releases you've got coming out, any book specials. I used to do an e-newsletter every month. I don't do it anymore because, quite frankly, I felt like I was kind of bothering people on my list. And so I use it 4 or 5 times a year. I'll do it obviously as a back to school special. I'll do it a holiday special. I'll do it around Easter, spring break time. I do summer reading specials. There's all kinds of opportunities where you can promote your book, but if it's got a specific topic, there might be a time when you want to promote it. For example, my environmental book called Trouble on the St. Johns River is very popular around Earth Day. So I start promoting it with my Facebook and other social media. I'll send out an e-blast. I'm promoting it because it's timely. Same thing with my Boston book. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a soul is still alive who remembers that day and year. That was the day that Paul Revere made his famous ride through the countryside. So I'm always promoting my Lost in Boston book a few weeks before April 18th. Just think about the ways that your book connects with what's going on could be going on in the classroom with their curriculum. And then that's what you're going to put your energy in your marketing. Publishers can help create graphics specific to education for authors to use. I don't know how to do that stuff. As a self-published author, I pay my freelance graphic designer to design those things for me because I'm not good at it. So as a publisher, you could provide that to your authors, or you could provide a workshop where they learn how to do that themselves, like Canva or some of those programs out there where they can do that. But those graphics can go on their website. It can go on their social media. It can go in all their marketing materials. And it really makes them look more professional, more polished than just words. So I strongly suggest publishers help provide that. Usually a larger publishing company will have someone on staff that does graphic design for them. You can provide that to your authors. You want to help them develop print materials, a sell sheet, or as I call it, my 5-book information flyer, a school discount order form, or a speaker sheet. I have all of those on my website. You're all welcome to go and look at them, use them however you want. My passion as a former teacher, I don't know if I mentioned that, I want to get kids reading. If we lose them after 3rd, 4th, 5th grade because they aren't reading on grade level, we frequently lose them completely. So I'm passionate about getting kids reading. I make all of these forms on my website very easy for schools to access. So maybe some of them are at the local school, they're a little embarrassed about picking up the phone and calling me. I've had people say, oh, I didn't know I was going to get you. And they're excited. You know, kids always say, oh, a real author. And I haven't met an unreal author yet. I'm sure they're out there. But anyway, take advantage of that. And if you have these print materials easily available on your website, then they're more comfortable communicating with you either through email or picking up the phone. And then, of course, creating visual resources, book trailers, read aloud videos, author interviews. A lot of authors don't know how to do that. They don't have the equipment, the software, the technology. And so if a publisher can help provide that to an author, it's going to help them market their books.
It also occurs to me, Jane, that there's an advantage for the publisher in helping with these materials, because then there's, especially if you're publishing multiple authors, there's a sense of a cohesiveness visually, and there isn't just like, you know, bad graphics out there in the world that are promoting your books. Like it's to everybody's advantage that it look really professional.
Definitely. So much of this that I'm talking about is a partnership between the author and the publisher. And there just needs to be some level of communicating but then what can the publisher provide for that author to help them market the books? Because you never know when they're going to get a large sale. My biggest sale was in 2014. I had a large school district ordered 6,400 copies of one of my books. Now, it's obviously the biggest purchase order I ever got. And in fact, I bought a new car that year. It was great. But the reason my book was selected is that happened in 2014, that purchase order. That book was published in 2004. It was still relevant. So many fourth grade teachers had used it over that 10-year period that when the superintendent told the schools, I want kids learning history through fiction, so many fourth grade teachers said, we want to use Jane Wood's book. I got a phone call and a purchase order for 6,400 books. So you never know where it's going to go. You never know. But one of the things that helped sell my book to those fourth grade teachers was I developed educational resources to go along with the book to make it easy for the teacher to use my book. I have discussion questions. I mean, I wrote the book. If I can't create the discussion questions, then I might as well go home. I did a list of vocabulary words that I thought fourth graders might not know. I do website links. With my environmental book, I have a list of websites that teachers can go to learn more about what I talked about in the book. I talk about manatees, so I send them to the Save the Manatee Club website. I got an endorsement from the Save the Manatee Club website because of the book. I send them to the Georgia Sea Turtle Center website because that's where they can learn about sea turtles. And my characters in the book visited the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. So you see a pattern here. They're selling my books in their bookstores. They're having me come up and do book signings. The teachers are benefiting from it. The parents are going there because they went to the website and they found valuable information. The kids were excited about learning about sea turtles. And so it's just a wonderful synergy that develops when you develop these resources. I have a lot of parents that go to my website, and all of these resources are on my website. All of you are free to go there and look at them. Authors need to develop presentations for students, either in person or virtual. I did a lot of virtual presentations last year, and I call these author visits to schools, which is what the schools call them. So I have a flyer that lists everything that I do when I do a author visit to the school. It lists my price on there. Some schools, some teachers, some media specialists are embarrassed to ask you what your price are. I just put it all out there, making it easy on them to want to call me and schedule an author visit. Presentations, I do a whole webinar on how to do effective presentations to students. But basically, you want to do something that's targeted to that audience. I mean, you're not going to talk to fourth graders like you would to a high school class. And I know a lot of you were interested in presentations and selling to high schools. I can tell you a lot of high school English teachers, particularly the creative writing teacher, wants to have authors to come in and speak, talk about the writing process. And so just think about who your audience is again, and then you're going to customize your presentation to that student audience. And again, I have a whole other webinar I do on presentations to students. Don't forget about parent groups. Volunteer to be a speaker at the PTA meeting. Now they're scheduling all those right now for next year. Usually they only want 5 or 10 minutes, but the nice thing is, and you're not going in there saying, I want to go and sell my books to your parents and your kids. You go in there and you say, I have a book that I think will get kids reading. And then you talk about the value of why kids need to be reading on grade level. Reading councils. Most every district has a reading council. And these are reading teachers that get together quarterly or once a month. Youth program organizers, boys and girls clubs, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Lots of youth programs out there, particularly in the inner city, where you've got nonprofits that have facilities where they want kids to come after school. Give them some books, donate a few books, and then talk to them about how you can offer a discount if they want to do a bulk order. They have sponsors. They have people that want to make financial contributions to help with these youth programs. Why not sell them some books? And then, of course, encourage word of mouth endorsements from other educators who have used your books. That's a no-brainer. Word of mouth is just the best way to be marketing your book. How to get paid. This is the fun part. School budgets. Media specialists will have a budget. Principal obviously has a budget. Sometimes the reading coach, sometimes the guidance counselor. They all have budgets. You just need to kind of target where you're going and see if you can't get some of that budget to buy some of your books. Grants and Title I programs are another way books get purchased. These have to be written by the school. You can't write those. And Title I programs get federal funding. So if you get in with a Title I program, the chances are they're going to buy at least one classroom set and sometimes multiple sets. If you do an author visit there, you're not going to sell a lot of books to those kids because they don't have the money. But they're the ones that need the books more than anybody. I love doing Title I programs because we're getting those kids reading. After school programs, extended day, they have a separate budget. They don't have to jump through the same hoops that the principal or the media specialist does because their budget is from parents paying for the kids to stay there after school. And I've done many programs with after school programs. I think I sold about 200 books to the last program that I did. PTAs, business partners, they will fund books. And then for authors who aren't comfortable with all of this, you've got to be prepared to invoice, to accept purchase orders, and accept credit cards. Now, if it's going through the publisher, they know how to do all that. But if you're a author and you want to sell to schools and you're not comfortable with that, my advice to you is to get over it. Learn how to do that. The first time you do it, you might make a few mistakes. Well, oops, guess what? Now you've learned how to do it properly. So those are just some of my suggestions for how you can market and make your books appealing to schools. I have a book called Schools, a Niche Market for Authors. This is my shameless self-promotion, but I know that Lee's going to offer one as a prize. And I'm also going to offer a discount with a code. If you go to my website and order it, there'll be an IBPA code there.
And
So,
Jane, you were talking about that it's actually of use not just for authors, but also for publishers.
yes. Okay, good.
Well, cool that we have a bunch of questions queued up. Thank you. That was great. And again, there's a handout that we'll be sending on Friday that echoes much of what was in the slides to sort of track through, and you'll all get a recording, a version of the recording of this by the end of the day on Friday as well. And if you're watching the recording, then hey, yes, you've arrived. You're watching the recording. Well done. Let's go into some questions. So let's start out with, there were a couple of questions about, is there a range for school discounts?
Oh, yes and no. Some places are very structured, and you have to fit within that range. Others, it's wide open. And talking about discounts, I have author friends that do author visits to schools. They charge full price to the kids. They charge full price to the school, but then they'll donate so many copies. I mean, to me, everything's negotiable. There's different ways that you can handle that. My point to publishers was be aware that schools are going to expect a discount. And if they're not going to get a discount, they're going to want some books donated. So either you or the author is going to have to step forward and do that. It's just the way business is done.
And that expectation of discount, that's different expectation for each school district or each state, or like at what, whoever you're selling to.
Yeah, everything I've talked about is going to be different for different states. The other thing I didn't mention is that when you're doing discounts to schools, make sure you get the school ID tax exempt number so that you don't have to pay taxes on that, because they don't have to pay taxes. And that's just another thing that I talk about when I talk about selling to schools. But that tax exempt number is important to them because now they're getting it even less of the retail price.
Cool. Another question, I believe this was from Antigone. I've worked with a curriculum specialist and created a teacher's guide. The questions and projects are aligned with the Common Core. You mentioned some people in some schools have an aversion to that. So what's the best way to deal in that situation?
You just want to label it differently. I will tell you, I've looked at Common Core for years. I've looked at state standards, and they're pretty similar. It's just that Common Core got a bad name politically several years ago. And so, and in fact, in the book that I just showed you, my Schools a Niche Market book, I talk about Common Core. So we're going to be updating that probably this month, just to remove the title Common Core. You call it state standards, just generic state standards. You don't want to put a state in front of it unless you're going specifically to that state. I would say Florida state standards. But if you're going to make it generic to go out to other states, just refer to them as state standards.
That's great advice. Okay. Jody is asking, Jane, how do you process the payments during school visits? Ahead of time via orders from teachers or at the event?
Ideally, you want the school to order in advance so the kids have read the book before you go do your author visit, if you're going to do an author visit. So ideally, they would order them in advance. You're going to probably get a purchase order from the school district. And sometimes it takes many weeks to get your payment, but they're good for it, particularly if it's like Title I funds that have to go through the district office. And then it's going to be lengthy. And sometimes you have to pick up the phone and call somebody, the bookkeeper, and say, by the way, I haven't received payment. I know when I go in to do an author visit at a school, I always make the bookkeeper my best friend. I walk in, I introduce myself. Hey, I'm doing a school visit here today. I just wanted you to match a name and a face together, because if I have to call and ask for payment, that bookkeeper is a lot more amenable to tracking it down. It's probably sitting on the media specialist desk under a pile of books. But to answer your question, some will do credit cards, which are great because you can process that immediately. Some will do a purchase order. Some of them you invoice, they'll send you a check. It's soup to nuts. It just, every school has a different policy. Even schools within the same district will have different policies.
Thank you.
Answered that completely, did I?
I think so. If not, then we'll ask the requester to chime back in. Charlotte is curious, is asking specifically about the SCBWI list, but are there other lists that schools are paying attention to that it's helpful to be on?
There are all kinds of lists out there. And again, it's soup to nuts. There's a lot of mom blogs. There's teacher blogs. I mean, you'll see hundreds of them. You can Google, the 100 best classic books. You're going to see all the classics on that list. But there's lots of websites that will list other interesting books. Now, what you get into, obviously, is a publisher will have a list of all the books that they publish at different grade levels. I tend to just do a lot of Google research, get online and start looking at, mostly I try to keep it local to the state, because they're all, books about Florida might not be interesting in New England, and books out in California might be very different from, what's going on in Montana. I try to be very specific to a geographic area when I'm promoting. But yeah, there are lists out there. I would go first to your state reading lists, because that's what the schools are looking at. And those have all been approved. And if you've got a book that's similar to a book on the state reading list, then you can use that. You can say, well, my book is just like, or it's similar to. And if kids like that book, they'll like my book. So you just got to do your homework.
Cool. Speaking of homework, Felicia's curious, are there specific ways to find the educated related media specialist conferences? Is there like a national listing of those, or is it just a Google search?
It's a Google search. I don't know that there's a national listing. I always do it by state. And you're going to put in the state, Florida Media Specialists Organization. In Florida, it's called FAME, F-A-M-E. Nobody would think to put in FAME. It's Florida Association of Media and Education. But if you Google Florida Media Specialist Organization, it's going to send you to FAME. You've just got to dig. Just do the Google search and dig. I don't know that there's an overall national. Now I will, of course, tell you about ALA, the American Library Association, and you've got school media specialists going to their events. They have regional events. They have, very technical ones, very specific ones. So don't overlook ALA, the American Library Association.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Librarians are awesome. So a couple of more questions and we're winding down. I wanted to let everybody know that I have done behind the scenes a little magic random number generating. So we have 3 prize winners, but let's do a few more questions. Yeah, I'm going to make you stay. I'm going to make you stay for it. And then we'll announce the prize winners. So Mary asked a great question. Well, they're all good, great questions. But how important are reviews in trade publications to sell your books to schools?
Very important, particularly school library journal. Media specialists at schools, that's their Bible. But all of the other magazines, I mean, a Kirkus, a library journal, I'm going blank again. And that's interesting that I'm going blank because I'm right in the process of promoting a new book and it's going out for reviews this week. So my letters and my, they're taking them all electronically now. You don't have to send the printed versions, but any of those national reviews, and don't overlook local reviews. If you've got a book reviewer for your local newspaper or the biggest city near you, that gets the attention of the local media specialists and teachers because they read the newspaper and then they read about this book. If you've got a local TV station or a radio station that you can get on and be a guest when you're launching a book, teachers and parents see those and all of that helps. It's just all a part of your marketing plan.
Excellent. All right. So here are the winners. Congratulations to Debbie Nutley, Jody Dyer, and Terry Wright. 3 winners. So I believe one of you is going to win a copy of Jane's book and 2 of you are going to get some swag. But we may change that around a little bit. I will let you know. I'll send you an email. Congratulations to you. Jane, any final words of enthusiastic advice for our wonderful audience?
Well, as I said earlier, a lot of it's common sense marketing, the same things you would do if you were marketing to bookstores or libraries or any place else. It's about relationships, establishing a relationship, finding somebody at the state level, at the district level, at the local school, and then nurture that relationship because it's not just about one purchase. Every year you get a whole new group of students. And if you've targeted a specific grade level, those kids have moved on and that teacher or media specialist say, hey, let's get some more of Jane's books because it worked out so well last year. So think about marketing the same way, marketing to schools and appealing to schools with a lot of the same strategies you use in any of your marketing plans. And then remember, it's about relationships, not just with your buyers and your students and your parents, but with your publisher. It's got to be a two-way street, a lot of communication. Don't drive them crazy with emails. I'm talking about teachers and media specialists, but be there as a resource for them. And it's amazing. Most of my school visits now are repeat visits to schools. They've liked what I've done in the past, or they say, oh, she's got a new book. Let's have her come talk about the new books. So again, marketing is all about networking and nourishing those relationships.
And I really love the example you gave of sort of the long tail, right? Like this isn't like a movie blockbuster that the opening weekend you have to hit the New York Times bestseller list. This is like that story about selling your book for 10 years. And then you finally built it up to the point where they bought 6,400 copies. We should all aim for that, right? That's amazing. Jane, thank you so much. What an amazing presentation. Shout out to Ingram. Thank you so much for being a sponsor of today's event. Thank you to everybody in our community for being here. We really appreciate you and we hope to see you at a future IBPA educational event soon. Take care, everyone.